Hey everyone, it's Pastor Alec back again, here with Eli. How's it going?
I'm pretty good. How you doing?
Doing all right, doing all right. So we're recording this. It'll come out a few weeks after this, but we're recording this is right after Easter.
Right.
So it's been a busy week. Um, but we're back at it again in Genesis. And what you got for me?
I've been reading 25 to 28 this week.
25 to 28, okay.
Tried to read a verse a day, but
Okay.
starting with Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
First, I think it's funny you see brothers in the Bible. I think this is the second time they've
Yeah.
been highlighted, and they both fight.
Yeah, well, yeah, that first one isn't such a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, neither is this one, I guess. But yeah, okay. Yeah, they're not getting along.
Right. And I like how it shows how it starts in the womb. Verse 22, the babies jostled each other within her. And she said, "Why is this happening to me?"
Yeah.
So it kind of just shows you how that's going to go from the start.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it's interesting too because Jacob, when he gets older and he and Esau have their falling out,
Right.
right? He's gonna get renamed by God as Israel, which means one who wrestles with God, even.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
so yeah, it is interesting that they're already kind of fighting in the womb,
Right.
right? And
Reminds me of me and my brother.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you can identify with this, can't you? Yeah, I guess so can I, right? That,
Yeah.
um, and then it's interesting that he's also described Jacob as one is that he grabs his heel,
Yeah.
you know, and that was actually that was an idiom that actually meant to deceive or to best somebody.
Okay. Yeah.
So Jacob is known as kind of a heel grabber, one who and through the narrative he is deceiving people,
Right.
right? I mean, he deceives his father with the help of his mother, and he deceives his brother, and he doesn't really deceive Laban, but he kind of bests him.
Yeah. Now, grabbing his heel, does that have anything to do with the serpent in any way? You will strike his heel and he will
Oh,
strike
that's
your head.
interesting. I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
that before. I don't know. I'd have to think about. Yeah, that's what the serpent does. Is in the prophecy from Genesis 3 that that the offspring of the woman would strike his head, but the serpent would
Yeah.
grab his heel. Yeah, I'd have to look. It'd be interesting to compare the Hebrew text on those.
Right.
I don't have that in front of me right now, but that would be interesting. That's a neat connection.
It just popped
Yeah.
in my head
Yeah.
when you
Okay.
said that. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
So when Isaac says Rebecca is his sister, I believe this is 26.
Yeah.
Does that tie back to Abraham or have any significance?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is weird. It's kind of difficult to figure out what's really going on here because, it says Abimelech and he's king of the Philistines, and he seems to be, Abraham and Sarah tried to pulled this same trick on Abimelech, right? Which is kind of weird because you think about how old are these people?
Yeah.
Remember, I mean, Sarah and Abraham were pretty old when
Yeah.
it happened with them. Or at least if the story's in chronological order.
Right.
Maybe it's not, but either way, then, you get his Abraham and Sarah, their son, and now his wife, and they're doing the same thing. It's difficult to kind of figure out how old were Sarah and Abraham when it happened.
Right.
Again, if it's chronological, then they're really old.
Yeah.
And in fact, right after that happens, right, then Isaac is born, right? Because that's the one that happens later on,
Right.
right before Isaac's birth, right? So yeah, it seems, and then now the children are doing it, and I don't know. I really don't know what to make of that one.
Right. I kind of pictured Abimelech as like the Queen of England living through
Yeah.
multiple generations.
Yeah, right. Through everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, but they do say the same thing as Abraham and Sarah say,
Right.
right? And now we do know that Rebecca is not Isaac's sister or half sister,
Right.
so it is a little different when they do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
more deceiving kind of.
But you do see that Isaac is like his father and his mother.
Right.
You know.
Why did Abimelech's people stop up Abraham's wells? Was that because he died, or?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why, if there's a reason for that. Maybe I think it's just maybe a point of kind of information. It kind of shows that maybe there is some contention between Abraham and the Philistines.
Yeah.
If you read in verse 17, so 26:17, so Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. And Isaac dug again the wells of water that had been dug in the days of Abraham his father, which the Philistines had stopped after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the names that his father had given them. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdmen, saying, "The water is ours." And so it just shows you kind of there's this maybe contention around these wells.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you're talking a lot of that. It's interesting because the Philistines are related to the Sea People, like maybe the Phoenicians.
Okay.
And so you've got Abraham that comes out of the land of, Ur, kind of the Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and the Euphrates there.
Right.
And so Abraham is not from there. The Philistines are also not from there. And so now the Philistines have come by boat there, and Abraham has come by land, and Abraham is kind of a nomad, and the Philistines are setting up their encampments in Gaza.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting is that both kind of people groups kind of converging on the same area,
Right.
and there's quarreling that's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best I could probably make of it.
Yeah, well,
Now, it's difficult, though, because archaeologically, I don't think there's a whole lot of – I don't think there's any evidence for Philistines that early there.
Yeah.
So, and that's always kind of been a point of contention, I know, at least in, like, biblical archaeology, talking about when you're talking about the narrative here in the Bible is that Abraham, you're talking, like, 1900 B.C., and I don't think the Philistines were I don't think there's any evidence that the Philistines were there yet.
Okay.
So that's something that people like to zero in on and say, hey, were the Philistines even there at that time?
Right.
But I mean, they are, because Abimelech is there, and it says the Philistines are there, just no clear evidence of
Right.
them. So
Well, one of my questions was, how old would Abimelech be at this point?
I have no idea how old.
Right.
I've thought about this. Like, reading through this, every time I read through this, I just kind of think, I don't know exactly what's happening.
Right.
So, it's weird. I'll just say that. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Jacob deceiving Isaac, what did Rebekah gain from that? Or did she just want?
Well, remember, Rebekah receives the promise that the older will serve the younger.
Okay.
So they're twins, but Esau's older than Jacob.
Right.
Okay, and so he gets the birthright, and so what Rebekah tries to do is she tries to take it into her own hands. Now remember, there's Jacob and Esau are very different from each other.
Right.
Throughout the narrative, you get this sense that, remember, Esau he's hairy, and he is a man of the field,
Right.
outside. Jacob he stays in the tent. He is kind of more of a homebody.
Right.
And there is kind of, and it makes it very clear in the narrative also that Jacob is really beloved by his mother, and Esau is really beloved by his father.
Right.
And so you've got a very interesting family dynamic going there. So it's almost like, I kind of think about it like this, where you have Jacob is spending time with his mother in the tent, kind of taking after her and doing the things that she's doing.
Right.
That's what it seems like. Whereas Esau is out, and he is he's doing things outside of the tent, and he is doing things that please his father.
Right.
Right. So there is kind of throughout Genesis, there is kind of a tension between kind of epic hero culture and domesticated culture.
Yeah.
All right. And you see Genesis kind of tips its hat to that. I don't think we talked about this, but it kind of tips its hat to that during the time of the flood, like Genesis 6-9, and then afterward. And there's a warning against kind of the epic hero culture, and you can kind of see it. You see it in Cain's line. You see it in the heroes of great renown that are mentioned in Genesis 6.
Right.
You see it in the Tower of Babel. Okay, kind of this epic hero life is an adventure, and it's specifically for the man.
Right.
And in order to gain a name for yourself, you do these mighty deeds and these mighty acts.
Okay.
And it really is probably written in response to Babylonian epic culture, which is epitomized in the Gilgamesh narrative.
Okay.
Gilgamesh is a man who is seeking immortality through his deeds.
Yeah.
And he's got kind of his frenemy, right? His buddy, his competition. They end up being friends, Enkidu,
Right.
and they're competing with each other. But then Genesis offers a different narrative to that, and the alternate narrative that it actually lifts up is a domesticated life.
Okay.
So instead of having Gilgamesh and Enkidu, who are rivals who end up being friends,
Right.
You have in the garden Adam and Eve. There's a
Yeah.
man and a woman, and there's a domesticated lifestyle. And you think Abraham, how Abraham is going to live on? God says he gives a promise. It's not through his mighty acts, right? It's through his children.
Right.
Right, that's how his name will live on, and so there's always kind of this tension throughout Genesis, and I think you see it here with Jacob and Esau, and so you see which one God actually chooses.
Right.
I mean, throughout the whole, for the whole time, there is definitely this kind of beware of the epic hero culture of Babylon.
Yeah.
Okay. God floods it out. He separates it. He floods it out, then he separates it out after the
Right.
Tower of Babel. And then Abraham is completely different. Now Abraham still kind of has this with him, though. I mean, Abraham can go to war too with his men, right? I mean, he does it. But there's a different way of seeing the world.
Okay.
Right? So here, though, you've got two extremes with Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
And Jacob is definitely, his mother kind of pushes him. She's told that he's going to get the blessing,
Right.
and she makes it happen. Again, this is very similar to what you see with Abraham and Sarah
Right.
and Hagar. They try the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, you see when it's happening, when Isaac is tricked by Jacob and by Rebekah. Again, it kind of shows what we talked about last time was him just being very passive.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Isaac he's passive. He's not really in control of his narrative at all.
Right.
He's not really an actor. Things happen to him.
Yeah.
But then again, though, Jacob and Esau will meet up later on, and you'll see Esau with his family and Jacob with his family, and they'll
Right.
end up making amends.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Does Bethel, where Jacob, that mount that Jacob fell asleep on, had that dream, does that tie to Bethlehem anyway?
Bethel, and so there are a lot of Bethels and there are a lot of Bethlehems. Okay, those are think about those are that's like an ancient Israel version of Springfield or
Okay, yeah.
Greenville.
Yeah.
All right, I mean, really, they're everywhere, and so it's actually difficult to figure out which Bethel we're talking about
Right.
sometimes, or which Bethlehem we're talking about.
Okay.
But what you're identifying is they begin with the same word.
Right.
Okay, and that's Beit, which is a Hebrew for house,
Okay.
and Beit Lechem means bread house.
Okay.
It's literally what it means. Okay,
So it's just-
Lechem is bread,
It's just a
and
regular.
it's
name.
just a regular
Yeah.
name. And then Beit El is it's house God. It's like house of
Okay.
God.
Yeah.
And And now you will see Bethel play a role later on when the kingdom ends up being divided as a holy place. So Bethel is regarded. I mean, this specific Bethel is regarded as a holy place from then on.
So now is that why Bethlehem is Bethle? Because it's not Bethel.
Right. It's not Bethel.
Just bread.
It's Beit
House of bread.
Lechem versus Beit El.
Okay. I understand that now.
Yeah. And well, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, yeah, I had one more. You were explaining Jacob, but I can't remember what I was going to ask. You can go ahead.
I was going to say, since you brought up Bethel, I thought we'd talk about what happens at Bethel, right? He has this vision,
right?
And I think sometimes it frustrates me. We talk about Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not a ladder.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. When I think of a ladder, I think of like like a step ladder or something. But it's probably the closest thing he probably could have conceived of for his time period is probably a ziggurat, which is a Babylonian building that looks like a step pyramid with a staircase that runs up the middle.
Right.
And that's probably what they were trying to build with the Tower of Babel. Some people think the ziggurat of is the Tower of Babel.
Right.
And we talked about that before too, I think. And so it's possible that he actually sees this massive structure that's almost like some kind, it's like enigmatic. I mean, it's this phantom structure.
Right.
And these ziggurat, the reason they would build these things is it was supposed to be a staircase to heaven, which is what you see in the Tower of Babel, right? But here, God is showing himself. It's like he has his own ziggurat just on his own terms, right? Yes, you can, he's up there at the top, and there's angels ascending and descending,
right?
But that's probably what he sees. I mean, it would have been this majestic view.
Oh yeah.
Rather than this whole Jacob's ladder thing just drives me crazy.
Well, that's how I kind of pictured it, as like something more than what it said it was, because it just sounded like basic. It was just a ladder that God's angels was coming up and down.
Yeah. What?
You would think that it would just be, because like when they describe the transfiguration of Christ, they go into full detail about how he turns, and that's kind of how I imagined it would be. A little bit.
I think that, the transfiguration kind of, and it's interesting because God meets his people up on the mount.
Right.
Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai that's the place where Elijah talks to God. It's where Moses talks to God, and then you see them both talking to Jesus on a mount for the transfiguration. But it's like, God creates his own mount. It's like the heavenly Jerusalem or something on the mount. Is that his ziggurat or something? I don't know. But and I think that's our language also that we project onto the text. Jacob's ladder.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, all right. You got anything else?
That's all I had this week.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll keep working through, and we'll see how far we go next time. Mm-hmm. And there's Jacob. Just to kind of to close here, I think it's important to always keep in mind kind of the structure of a book, how it's organized, and so here I'm going to give you kind of a helpful way to think of the structure. Is like the first narrative is the creation narrative, and that's really from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11. Is the creation narrative. Yeah. All the way through the Tower of Babel. That sets up the world for the way things are now.
Right.
Okay. Then there's another narrative, and that's the Abraham narrative.
Yeah.
And the Abraham narrative really goes from chapter 12 to like 24, maybe 25. He dies in 25, but really... the narrative of Isaac kind of is a transitional narrative into Jacob's narrative. So creation 1 to 11, Abraham 1 to 24 or 25, and then after that you get the Jacob narrative.
Right.
Now, again, Isaac is a transitional figure. He doesn't really have his own narrative. Okay, he's either the son of Abraham or he's the father of Jacob.
Right.
That's what he is. Okay, and so then you get that narrative that goes from 24, 25, and that goes all the way till up to about 36 or 37.
Okay.
And then you transition from the Jacob narrative to the Joseph and his brothers narrative.
Okay.
And the narrative for Joseph and his brothers then will take you from 37 all the way to chapter 50.
Right.
Okay, so again, creation is 1 to 11. Abraham is 12 to 24. Jacob is 25 to 36.
Right.
And then Joseph is like 37 to 50.
Okay.
And if you think about that, if you kind of remember that structure, you can kind of think to yourself, okay, if you want to find something, let's go back, say you're going back and referencing one of these stories and say, I remember something about Jacob, but I forgot where it was.
Right.
You could probably go, you could go from 25 to 36 and you'll probably find it.
Right.
You might find it in 37 because he's still a figure in 37 through 50, but he's in 37 through 50, Jacob is just Joseph's father, really, at that point.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, maybe you'll find that helpful. But
like a table of contents.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But yeah, kind of thinking how each book is structured and organized can be helpful. So, well, thank you for your questions.
I had fun. Always have fun.
Yeah, me too.
Learn a lot.
Yeah, well, it's good to think through some stuff, and I'm going to be thinking about that Jacob grabbing his heel. And the serpent in the heel. That's really interesting. So,
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.